All right, cool. We're live. So, good Sunday afternoon, everybody. Hope everyone has having a great weekend, and I'm excited to chat with a real badass trainer, Mark Goldberg.
Well,
And
this
you
guy.
know, I like I lo- like I love his work. I love his work. I have his books, which I have right here.
Look, we're twinning. We're twinning on the book.
But yeah, Mark. Yeah, it's mentor's a little bit of a mentor because we did some Zoom lessons too. But Mark, why did you go ahead and introduce yourself, where you're at, what's your business, and what you do, specialize in?
All right. Well, happy to do it. Then, first of all, thank you, Kevin, for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you and your listeners. Well, let's see. I'm out here in suburban Chicago, and that's why one of my websites is chicagodogtrainer.com. And I do a lot of boarding school. I do a lot of boarding school programs for my clients, but I also do Zooms or in-person lessons. Just depends on what the needs of the client are. Now, I've been a dog trainer most of my life, which at this point is a lot of years. So
Mm-hmm.
I trained my first dog. I started training. I started training in 1969, which is a little shocking to me now. You know how, Kevin, when you have to fill out your birthday on a thing and you get the drop box, you pick your month and then drop
Mm-hmm.
box, you got to scroll. I'm born on the 30th, so I got to scroll all the way down. Right? But then the shocking thing is when I got to find my year, because I think they, most of the internet assumes I'd be dead by now because I got to scroll. So I've been around quite a very, very long time. So, and it's just to put some context to it, I started training dogs when I was 11 years old, and I'm 66 now. So it's over half a century, which, like I said, it's a little shocking. So I was a child bride to training dogs. And the whole reason I got into dogs in the first place was I think it was inevitable for me. I was born in the Chinese year of the dog to a father who was born in the Chinese year of the dog. So we both have an incredible. If there's anybody nuttier, crazier about dogs than me, it is definitely my dad, Barney. He is above and beyond. But so I think it was kind of inevitable. But my first dog ran into the street when I was little, when I was 11, and got hit by a car. Now that Sheltie, his name was Gus. He lived to be almost 18 years old. So that dog, even though he got hit by the car, he lived. He took me from the age of 11 to like 29, almost like from childhood all the way like deep into my adulthood. And
Mm-hmm.
that's an extraordinary, beautiful thing to have a dog through that entire period of your life. But when his leg got broken from that car, and my mother then shipped us off to dog school, and so that's really what started it for me. And I think what really bit me really hard, I got the bug for dog training so early, was because my dog was very, very smart, and he was also very willing. He was a pleaser personality,
Mm-hmm.
unlike me. And so he really wanted me to be happy with him. And so in the case of training that dog, most of it was just getting out of my own way and learning. And so it was a big class, and we won first prize. I think the dog was more responsible for that than me, but nonetheless, that really, made me feel wonderful. And I wanted to continue to train my dog, but there were no other classes that I knew of. So I just started reading books, and I read dozens and dozens. Eventually it was to be hundreds and hundreds of dog training books. And to make a long story just the littlest bit longer, by the time I was in middle school, still training my dog at this point now for AKC competitions, and he did very well at that, my teachers started to notice that I was obsessing over the dog books in the library. And so they started to take me home. I mean, this was the early 70s. So the teachers just called my mother and go, "We're taking the kid home today to work on the dog, and we'll bring him back before supper." And that's what they did. So, and then they gave me money, which was really the first time it ever happened, by the way. It was the librarian, and she takes me home, called my mom, took me home, and she's got two dachshunds, but not the cute little mini dachshunds that we see today. I mean, these were the standard size.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't seen one in decades, but these dogs are enormous, like the size of like a proper submarine torpedo. They're big. They're short, but they're very big. And these two were very friendly, but very crazy. And the librarian was just, she just couldn't believe it when she watched outside her window as I trained the dogs in the front yard, and they started engaging and listening and doing the things that I wanted them to do. And when she took me home, you know, in that year, I've looked it up, the minimum wage was $1.12. And she gave me $5 for an hour playing with her dogs. I couldn't believe it. So that I noticed that too. So I thought, wow, this is amazing. I'm doing something that I really like, and I'm getting paid for it. And so out of that, a little bit of a career was born. So that's how I come to dog training.
Nice. Yeah, and I mean, to be honest, I was also born in the year of the dog, which just happens to be.
Look at that.
It just happened to sink in so well. And then like even in middle school or like high school, like I read like Cesar Millan books. I read like all the dog books, and you know, like after that, it's like just books. Sometimes it's like just having books is just a big source of knowledge, especially with like some of like there's a lot of good books, so I can't like list them all, but there's just something about it that you have to like read and get that versus like a video sometimes. But like especially with the way like you have your book right now with like
I'm going to show it and give the title proper. Look at the two of us. Big plug. I wrote this with the monks of New Skeet called The Art of Training.
Yeah.
We'll talk more about it as we go, I'm sure, but this is the complete guide to training your dog through off-leash reliability gently with a collar. So that's what this is.
Yeah. So, but yeah, you know, I figure like since Mark has a book about and does workshops about like training gently with the e-collar, and I figured it'd be a nice topic to talk about, like the benefits and like, you know, like what kind of method, like what's like, instead of just slapping it on a dog, you know, we gotta have the right method for it and things like that. You know, I'll just ask little questions to, you know, go back and forth. But anyone that's watching, feel free to like leave a comment, say hi. Which already we got George saying.
George Cockrell, big George Cockrell. You know that George, look, I don't mean to interrupt the stream here, but I'm going to tell a quick story. George Cockrell is a third generation dog trainer. He's son and grandson of a dog trainer. He's third generation, one of the most sensible, nicest guys you'll ever want to meet. But there's a man who knows his stuff right there. George Cockrell.
Yeah, I had the honor of meeting him at one of the conference too. George, it's good to hear from you, George. He's a really awesome guy.
So George says here that his dad used to run those standard dachshunds. So George, you know about them. What'd you hunt? Like badger, varmints? I'm imagining animals that were like tunneling, you know, like critters that were tunneled under. So tell us in the comments what you were hunting. But yeah, they were about 3 feet long. You know, yeah. They're like a good 40-pound dog. They're not so small. Rabbit. There we go.
Yeah, sure. Like you don't see like a standard size dachshund anymore. They're like little. They're like the size of those little toy loofers or things like that.
Right.
Petco, which is funny.
The minis are freaking adorable, but I really like them. But yeah, they came from the standard, and those have all but disappeared.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so listen, you kids today have it so easy. I had to walk uphill to dog training school in the snow both ways, right, George? I think actually it's a lovely, lovely time in dog training, because when I started, there were books, but there was a minimum amount of help. Now I was eventually to find mentors in my life, which helped me enormously. But dog trainers could be very clubby, very cliquey, very, very tight about their knowledge, very tight-lipped. And so, our buddy George here was lucky because, he was born into it. And so he had family to teach him from the beginning. And he's actually a super generous trainer who shares his wealth of knowledge. But that was uncommon at the time. Mm-hmm. So unless you happen to live near somebody like that, you were really going to learn everything by trial and error, which was very slow. Today, we have YouTube, we have courses, we have videos. There's an increasing amount of books. We have social media. and workshops and seminars, which I do, but holy cow, I would have loved to have been able to have access to that. So today, if there's a problem with information, it's how much of it there is.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much of it that it can be very difficult to pick out, the bits and pieces that are truly going to help you. But it certainly is nice to have all that access.
Yeah, I think for just like like your regular pet dog trainer, not pet dog trainer, a pet owner, I think it's like so hard. It's like reading off a menu that has like 1,000 options, and they Google how to train the dog, or they go like or like there's just so many things, especially like dog training can be politics between like it's force free, like they say like don't shock your dog, or like there's just trainers that just say, hey, use the e-collar for just like strict punishment sometimes, and then it's just like it's so much that the regular dog owner doesn't have like the right direction to go towards. That's like, I feel, especially where like right now with having access to like your book's like really simple, your book's like very like, it even has like pictures on it that's like that they can see like the narration and all that.
The inspiration for that, I'll tell you all about. But before we go there, I just want to make a comment about you mentioned force free. The funny thing is that I own forcefree.com because I invented the term, and I took I don't have a website up there. When I think of it, I'll point it at chicagodogtrainer.com or markgoldbergdogtrainer.com, which are my primary websites. But force free was a term that I coined because I still don't, I don't do compulsion training.
Mm-hmm.
I also don't do bribery training, but I don't know a decent dog trainer anywhere who doesn't use positive reinforcement. We all do it. Every decent dog trainer on earth does positive reinforcement. But the notion that the terminology force free means we should never contradict the dog is just a bunch of ineffective dog trainers sort of co-opting my terminology. So I'm a little amused, by their use of it. The fact of the matter is you don't need to force a dog or harm a dog or scare a dog or hurt a dog to get a solid recall off of rabbits. You just don't have to do that. You need a certain amount of skill. And I taught that skill to dogs for decades before ever using an e-collar.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because for such a long period of time, e-collars were just awful. The first time, Kevin, I ever handled an e-collar would have been about 1972, maybe 1973. And first of all, it was a big leather collar, big wide leather collar. The box, it was like, it was like this giant box on the collar. The remote control was a huge box. I mean, it was probably a good 12 inches tall, really thick. And then it had an old-fashioned whip antenna, like, that would accordion down. You'd have to pick up the antenna. And then it had one button. And that button just told the collar, vaporize the dog. I mean, there was no such thing as what level are you going to use. There was one button. There were no numbers. There was a button.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought a friend of mine, a dog friend of mine, had one. She intended to use it to teach her Irish setter to use his poop pen instead of just going, randomly in the yard. And so she had it, and I went to see this thing, and I picked it up, and I held it in my hand. I pushed that one button, and I tell you what, it like blew me across the room. And it sent me numb from the fingertips all the way up to the shoulder.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought, I can't use this thing, and I didn't. But that was 1972. Well, a lot of things happened between 1972 and the year, say, 2000.
Mm-hmm.
The internet, the internet was invented among other things. So there's just this tremendous rush of technology. And people were refining and playing with the e-collar, and they finally started building some decent ones. And my friend Mary Mazzari, she told me that she thought we should go look at the modern generation of e-collars. And here's the funny thing. You never met anybody more anti-e-collar back then than me, because I had that experience in 1970. I'm like, you're crazy. They're awful. We can't, no. And she goes, but they're doing a lot of new things that we should look at, and technology changes. And why do you want to? But just have an open mind. Let's go look. And I did, and I was simultaneous. What I saw the first time I saw somebody using an e-collar in a newer, more modern approach was, first, the e-collars were far more gentle. I mean, and even now, 25 years later, they're even better than they were then. Even 25 years ago, they started to get decent. And so I could put it on my hand and I could feel it. And, I personally don't love electricity, but nonetheless, it didn't freak me out either. And so here's what I saw at this workshop. What I saw was a guy making dogs do things faster than I could do. And I thought that was pretty cool. These dogs are doing things like holding a sit-stay, relatively untrained dogs, learning to hold a sit-stay quicker than what I could teach it, for example. That sort of thing. It was just building skill sets far more quickly than what I knew I could do. And I thought I was pretty good at this. And so I liked what I saw in terms of the speediness of the learning process. And so that was attractive. But there was a flip side to that coin that was troubling to me, very troubling. And that was, although the dogs were learning at an accelerated, highly accelerated rate, they were under stress and duress. And I mean, I could see this because they were kind of glassy-eyed, and they were panting, and they were stressy, and they were drooling. And I knew, being able to read a dog, I knew that this meant that these dogs were not only not enjoying the process, but they were in some form of distress, but not so much that they couldn't figure out what to do to avoid the, what they were being given as communication. And so it took me a very long time to pick apart. I didn't want to throw away the baby with the bathwater. Speed and learning is a good thing, right? And here's why. Because if you tell a client, listen, I'm going to need you to come for 25 weekly lessons to teach your dog to recall off of a rabbit, and you're going to have to practice 45 minutes a day, 5 days a week during that 25-week period, you're going to lose 90% of those clients. They're never going to get that recall. And they didn't. I mean, our own dogs had them because we put in the time. But so the speed I thought was good, but the stress, the not enjoying the process, and the fear, I mean, it wasn't nice. And so I spent several years trying to keep a measure of the increased speed, but to take away the level of stress. And the result of that was a method. It took several years to put together. I'd say 3, and then probably about another 5 to really refine it into what it is today, which is in the book. And so there are plenty of ways to use an e-collar. Some of them are terrible, but they're not all the ways to use an e-collar are terrible. The monks, which I'll talk a little bit more about the monks soon, but the monks and I wanted to present our method, which is a sequential way to get from a wild child of an untrained dog all the way up through a well-behaved companion who is trustworthy on and off leash. And we wanted to give that to people so that they could train their own dog if they so choose, or if they could work with a trainer that would help guide them through the method. And so that was the result that we ended up writing in this book.
It's really great. And then, like, I mean, I feel like one of the benefits that I feel like a lot of pet owners, or even just like dog trainers, would want to work on with having an e-collar is just being able to let your dog just, give them the freedom to like run around, be an actual dog, like your other books that let dogs be dogs. It's like, because like, especially too, like I just let my dogs, we took them to like a 10-acre sniff spot, and then they were just running, and like their face was just so happy just running, because um like my dogs, I could let them drag long lines, but then like just having them off leash and just giving them like that freedom, just a look on their face is just real, is so satisfying, and
Right, because because what you did for them was you gave them what appeals to their species.
hmm
The sense, the sights, the smells, and the ability to. I mean, they've got 4 legs for a reason. Even a little dog is faster than a human, and they have the intent and the sense and the joy of running. So um, I I worked with Wendy Volhard for a little while, a wonderful dog trainer. I mean, one of the most talented dog trainers I've ever met in my life. And she's an author, and she's written many wonderful books. And she really didn't like e-collars for the same reason that I didn't. But she
hmm
hadn't seen the new stuff, so I offered to show her the new stuff. And then she started experimenting with it much as I had. And she called me up one day, and she got a strong British accent, and she said, "Oh my God, darling, it's like freedom. It's like freedom. It's just like what you said. It's freedom," because her dogs were impeccably trained, but everybody has to worry about deer
hmm
when you take your dogs into hundreds of open acres, which is what she does and what I do. Hundreds of open acres. They can't fence it all in. I live in a right contiguous. I'm wrapped in by a 500-acre forest preserve here in Illinois. So it's hundreds of beautiful open acres, but you need pretty control of your dog, and you also need to know if the perfect storm arises, I can get my dog back. And once you have that confidence, what happens is your dog gets the freedom to be a dog to enjoy. We really wrestled with the title of the book, and it really came down to the art of training your dog or the freedom method of dog training, because I have such a strong affinity to the concept of freedom.
hmm
Because what good dog training does is it liberates a dog. It liberates a dog to have freedom of movement, number one, but also, two, freedom from conflict, because a trained dog isn't going to get yelled at, nagged, and repressed
hmm
the way people tend to do with their dogs when they're not so well trained.
Yeah, especially too where it's like, I mean, yeah, you have your stuff like deer, you have like, I mean, just your, like if you're at a local park, there's always a chance of running into like a street, into like someone's outdoor cat, or even like it's kind of like right, what you said about having the perfect storm, or like, that's why we have seatbelts. It's like in case something happens, we got our seatbelt, or like if we have the perfect storm, at least we have like the ideal umbrella to help us out with that. Especially where like some of the e-collars these days, like they have the coverage of either like half a mile, or like,
Yeah.
especially sometimes where, like sometimes when I'm at the beach, there's like the water's loud, or there's seagulls, or there's a bunch of commotion. Sometimes your dog's not gonna be able to hear you necessarily, but just like kind of text your dog, like you like.
Yeah, I love that terminology, text your dog. And for the people who don't really know what this looks like, if you train the dog right, when you text your dog, when you push the button to send a signal to the collar and send the tickle to the dog, here's what you're not going to see. There's no, you just see the dog go, "Oh, where are you?" Because like, I know this system, and this means Dad is looking for me. So I'm usually, if the dog is, in a noisy environment, I'm just kind of waving, and then I'm beckoning towards me, and then they know what it means. It means, get here.
Mm-hmm.
I had a client who, the dog kept killing skunks.
Mm,
And of course, she really didn't like, dead animals on her property, number one. And of course, the dog, the dog was constantly getting skunked, which was miserable for everybody. They say a dog will learn after being skunked once, but I beg to differ.
no, my Belgian Malinois, like we lived in like a little vineyard in a studio, and then like 2 months in a row, like weeks in between, went after the skunk, got skunked. I washed her. A few weeks, finally getting off the scent. All of a sudden, I hear her barking comes back, and I'm just like, her face is wet again. I like touch her face, put it up my nose, and I'm like, oh, not
Yes.
again.
Yeah, no, it's really, it's incredibly horrible. But anyway, she called me super excited one day because the dog pounced. The skunk ran under a bush, and the dog was just diving under the bush to get the skunk, and she was able to recall the dog away from the skunk, and she was just so incredibly thrilled. And I mean, I think that's really, really good, but I also think of all the times that people are able to call their dogs away from the street, if a ball rolls into the street or something even more lethal. And a buddy of mine, a trainer, told me that he recently had to recall his German Shepherd off a black bear, and I think that's a pretty good thing to call your dog away from. And I don't know when baby season is, but a bear with a baby is going to be making mincemeat out of a dog. So he was very happy to be able to call his dog.
Oh yeah, that's the thing is like, like with e-collar training, it's like I always love just having them like finding their levels, and it's like, tap, treat, tap, food a little bit, and then because like if I need to go a little higher just to keep my dog from going into the street, it's like compare that versus actually getting hit by the car, or actually like the dog getting actually to the bear, and then or mountain lion or some other like life-threatening thing. I'm like that little correction on the collar versus lethal. I'm like, okay, it's like I'd rather that because I'm actually gonna save this dog's life, Like,
listen, I agree. Although before we talk about correction, which refers to the levels on a collar, because collars can go all the way from the dog doesn't feel it all the way through the dog feels it too much.
Yeah.
I want to address just really quickly the fact that this is a book I co-wrote with the monks of New Skeet, and I'll put them in the comments now. Monks of New Skeet. And I'm going to put their domain. It's New Skeet, Skete, newskeet.org is their website. So I just thrown that. It's not going to let me put it into the comments, but nonetheless, newskeet.org. So look them up. But this is an order of Orthodox monks who have been breeding German Shepherds and training dogs since the 60s, and they've written numerous best-selling books that most dog trainers have heard of, including The Art of Raising a Puppy and How to Be Your Dog's Best Friend, as well as these books that we've co-authored together. George is asking for us to talk about how to find the correct way to find the proper level. And George, I think it's critical. Yeah, so happy to do it. But at any rate, the monks and I turned out to be very compatible. I met them when I was president of the International Association of Canine Professionals, and they were inducted into our Hall of Fame. And we just clicked, Brother Christopher and I. And so he came to one of my seminars with my friend Martin Dealey, and then he invited me up to Martin up to the monastery. And I was bowled over when I got to that monastery. First, it's a beautiful place. But, for dog people, it's kind of like a mecca of dogdom, where all these books were born. And I mean, anyway, it's pretty cool. So I started going and going back, and then working with them, and then training the dogs with them. And then we decided to write a book together. And then we just kept going after that one came out because we enjoyed that process. So the challenge, really, the challenge of writing this book was to break our method down into a sequence of steps, the way William Keeler broke his Keeler method of dog training down into a sequence of steps, which a human being, like to divide the entire job of Come When Called into many chunks, lots and lots of little steps, and then just teach the dog from the earliest steps all the way up through the beginning steps into the advanced stuff. In other words, building a foundation so that the dog can slowly come to understand what's required of him, even if it doesn't make sense to the dog. And mind you, when you're writing a dog training book, you're writing for people who maybe never trained a dog in their life. And now you want to teach them how to do like some complex stuff. And so Brother Christopher and I really had to examine how we were training, and it was good and it worked. And the essence of it, it's in the book. But we used to shortcut things a lot, as any dog trainer does, because we can read the dog. So how we would give a lesson to a client is a bit different than how we would train that dog ourselves if we had him living in our house. Because with the client, you need him to learn the steps. We just don't even think about steps. We just do intuitively. We just do what is going to make the most sense to that dog in that moment. Well, anyway, we really had to think about how to divide it up. And the end result for us was a series of 16 lessons. We created a timeline of 6 weeks, and we believe that the average person can train a dog from wild child through off-leash reliability by following our 16 steps over the course of 6 weeks. Now, yeah, you were talking about if you have to raise the level a little bit in order to correct a dog, let's say, from running into the street or something like that. And George is asking about the
correct way to find a proper level.
Establish a level. So there's a bit of controversy about exactly that.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to give you the common wisdom. And then I'll tell you what Brother Christopher and I do, which is a bit different. Mm-hmm. The most common method of determining a level for the collar that I have heard of, and I am going to mention this because I think the people out there in YouTube land and live stream land are going to hear of this, and so I want to address it. And it is that you put the collar on the dog, mm-hmm. and you start at a very low level, and you push the button when the dog is mildly distracted by something, a sniff or a bush or anything. And you just keep raising the level until you see some physical reaction on the dog, such as the flick of an ear, the blink of an eye, a slight tick, just until you see some physical reaction. This is not the way Brother Christopher or I find the level, and it's not how we've put it forth in the book. Mm-hmm. And before I tell you why, I'm going to tell you a story. Years ago, somebody asked me, while I was in that process of trying to deduce how to really make this work better, because the technology had created better e-collars. But, the e-collar, it's an inanimate tool. It's just a bunch of circuit boards and buttons and electronics, right? It's not a dog trainer. It's just a device. And until you put it in knowledgeable, compassionate, wise, loving hands, it's just a bunch of circuits. So while I was still in the midst of devising, how's this going to work, I was asked by somebody, what is your least favorite breed of dog to train? And I didn't even have to think twice. I knew exactly what my least favorite breed of dog to train was. And it's bulldogs. It was bulldogs. I was like, bulldogs. And they said, why? And I said, because every one of them tries to bite me at some point during the training process early on. Every single one. And it was true. Every bulldog I ever trained back in those days, even at a certain point early on in the training process, would come straight up that leash at me. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't for a while. It was a while before I figured out why. And it's an interesting story. The dog who explained it to me, which was a bulldog, but I'm going to jump to the conclusion. The bulldog, just as an example, is bred to be a little stoic. They don't wear their heart on their sleeve. The whole body construction of the breed and their entire nature is governed by their genetics, and they're bred to be kind of stoic. So what I realized I was doing is, remember I said start at a low level and then just keep slowly inching up until the dog makes some kind of physical reaction, and like a small one. But then that the dog is feeling it, and off you go. That's your baseline number there, right there. That's your baseline number. Well, a bulldog one time explained to me, here's the problem. I'm not going to tell you I feel it until it's really actually bothering me. And that's when I'm going to tell you I feel it. So put it on a bulldog. And by the way, they turn out to be indescribably sensitive. They're actually one of the more sensitive breeds to electronics. And knowing that, it's fine. You can accommodate that. You just got to go really low. And they love food. So you can trade them. Like tap, tap, tap on the shoulder. What do you need if it's low enough? I got food for you. Come over here. I'm going to give you that. Oh, and there's no objection. But you tap the button on a bulldog. The bulldog is just looking at you with like blank expression saying, in his head, felt that, but he's not doing the lift of the eyebrow, you see? So you don't know. He'll just think, felt that. And then so you don't see anything. And so you raise it up a little and he goes, ooh, I felt that one too. And you don't see anything. So you raise it up a little more. And the bulldog goes, damn, this is getting a little uncomfortable. And you raise it up to the next one. And the bulldog goes, oh, damn, and that's when you see it. That's when you see it. And so you go, all right, well, that fourth number that I tried, that's our baseline number. Off we go to the races, and you start training the dog, pushing the button on that number anytime you want to communicate something to the dog. But the problem is that you're using a level for the dog that registered discomfort, and you didn't know that because you didn't know how to read the dog. I didn't know how to read the dog. Mm-hmm. I didn't, and so finally there was a little female bulldog who explained it to me and I listened. And what I then started to do was to turn my numbers way, way, way down. And then I got along fine with bulldogs. But what I came to realize was I need to find a different manner of figuring out my number. I need to find the threshold of perception. The threshold of perception, as adrenaline on a dog, dogs are very excitable creatures. Ooh, look, wind. Ooh, look, squirrel. Their adrenaline is going up and down at all times. And if you are giving a dog a sensation well over the threshold of perception, it's going to register as discomfort. If you give them a sensation well under the threshold of perception, it won't register at all. They won't know they won't know you've done it. So you want to be just a smidgeroony over the threshold of perception. The problem is perception in the dog is governed by adrenaline, and that's a moving target. So your number has always got to be above the threshold of perception, but the perception is a moving target. So a Malinois staring at you, thinking throw the ball, and you want to tap the button to reinforce the sit that you've asked for before you throw that ball, you're going to be down here. But a Malinois who is now chasing a seagull towards the open gate of the dog park or whatever it is, here was where you were a minute ago. But the second he's off and running, he's had an adrenaline jolt. And if you're still down here, he's not going to perceive it. Now, if you jump way up here, you're going to get too much of a reaction on the dog. But if you condition the dog, which we'll talk about, but if you condition the dog, pay attention to just whatever is just over your threshold of perception, because that's going to mean I need you. At the calm state of mind of a dog, which is where I want to start training. George, he says he calls it the point of perception. Look, George, great minds think alike. Great minds think alike. Because we've come to the same set of conclusions there. But where I want to start training a dog is indoors, low threshold of perception, low distraction level, right? Mm-hmm. So that's why the book calls for the dog to be started off training in the kitchen or in the living room, just where a really familiar environment where the distraction levels are going to be relatively low. And then what we're ultimately going to do is we're going to be walking around the house. We call it the purposeful walk, where you're just going at your fastest comfortable pace, which engages the attention of the dog. And we're going to have you go to various points throughout the house and make an about turn. And just as you make the about turn, we want you to just tap the button, just quick tap, just as you initiate your about turn. Now, there's a lot of different e-collars out there. So we need to pause and talk what makes a good e-collar. Mm-hmm. A good e-collar has a lot of levels. And that's not so that you can overpower the dog. To the contrary, it's so you can keep the dog comfortable. And that's because most e-collars go from low to pretty damn high. And cheap, garbage, crappy, Amazon e-collars go from here to here. Don't feel it to holy cow. They'll do it in 7 or 8 giant steps. Mm-hmm. And that means goes from don't feel it, ow. And there's just like nothing in between. Whereas the e-collars that I like, and there's multiple brands, but the ones that come to mind right now are Dogtra and e-collar Technologies. From this low to this high, they're doing it in dozens and dozens of tiny little increments, right? Mm-hmm. e-collar technology with the mini educator. It does it in 100 tiny little layers, and Dogtra does it in their famous 127 layers. I don't understand the number, but it goes to 127. And so now back to the dog. We're making these turns. We do that for 4, 5, 6 training sessions a couple times a day. They're brief. They're like 10 minutes. The dog gets used to it. And we recommend, for example, on a mini educator or in a Dogtra 280C or the Tom Davis edition, that you start right around 4 or 5. It says in the book. I'm actually starting people off slightly lower than that these days. But anyway, super low. And maybe the dog feels it. A lot of them do. Some of them don't. But basically, you're still teaching them we're turning. And after a few sessions of this, we want you to start throwing in surprise turn. Like, in other words, the dog is used to going from the kitchen refrigerator all the way to the back door. But now we want to find out, does he feel this 5 or whatever it is that you've set on your e-collar? So I want you to walk halfway, and the dog's thinking, I know, we're going all the way to the back door. And when you're only halfway there, we want you to push the button and make a turn. And if you do that a few times, and the dog is always with you, oh, I thought that we're turning. What the dog has learned is, excuse me, you're going to run out of leash. And that's what we're trying to teach the dog. This tiny, meaningless tap that is so low that you're going to have no need to tell me that you feel it. We just want to associate it at first with, you're going to run out of leash. I'm going to turn. If you turn with me, we can do it together. And most of the dogs are going to catch that. I get a lot of people. I have a Facebook group set up for readers of the book. And the Facebook group is called The Art of Training Your Dog with an E-Collar. So if anybody's interested, they can join up that. But I've had the question in the Facebook group by a lot of dog owners, I can't tell if my dog feels it. I'm doing that lesson, which is lesson 4, and I don't know if he feels it or not. And my answer always is good, because that tells me you're not overwhelming your dog.
Yep.
But at a certain level, the cat's going to cross your path, or something's going to happen, and you're going to tap that button, and the dog is either not going to feel it or he is, and he's going to go with you or he won't. If he doesn't, okay, fine, goose it up 1 or 2 points until you find that the dog is going, oh, you were turning, I'm with you. And that is what we call the educational level. Once you catch that, and most people, it will take them a few days to sort it out, as opposed to, I'm going to figure out your number, I'm going to figure it out right now. Because that's what caused bulldogs to come up the leash at me. I just did it too fast back then.
Yeah.
So.
I like had one similar story with like a Doberman that was like just had the most stoic face, like would just stare at you while I try to find the level, and then like the dog would just look at me like eyeball to eyeball, and then I would see his neck like twitch, and I'm just like, it's like a heartbeat when I was pressing the call, and I'm just like, buddy, I'm like, hello, I'm like, I know you feel it, but like your body feels it. And then it definitely like had to learn that way, whereas like some dogs are just stoic or they just don't want to express it.
We do talk about it in The Art of Training Your Dog. Here's my perception, and this is true of Brother Christopher from the Monks of Newski. We work together on all this stuff. What we notice is the tight-coated muscular breeds, bulldogs, Weimaraners, Dobies, that type of coat and that type of pipples, that type of muscularity, they tend to feel the collar on lower levels. In general, this is a generalization, so it's not true all the time, but in general, they tend to feel it on lower levels than do dogs with other kinds of coat and body construction. And it's not because there's better contact, meaning it's not because more electricity is getting through one coat versus the other, because the collar is adjusted, meaning, that whatever's touching the dog is adjusted for the type of coat that the dog has. There's just something about a really muscular, tight-coated dog. And if you think about it, most of the really muscular dogs are tight-coated. And here's my theory. What electricity does, like a TENS unit for a human being, is it, especially if it's electricity which is designed to be felt by the body, human or canine, which it's not all. And George kicked in another good comment, and because he heard that some of the manufacturers of e-collars have actually patented the type of stimulation that they deliver. And I've heard the exact same thing. So if you feel this on your hand, it doesn't feel jagged. It's not like you touch the doorknob and you get that giant snap and it really hurts. It's just very unpleasant. This is nothing like that. Very, very benign. It feels like, to me, it always feels like I poured Coke and it's fizzing on my palm, something like that. But the long and the short of it is, it contracts and releases a muscle very quickly. So a dog who is muscular is going to feel a more notable sensation than a dog who isn't. So a pit bull is just loaded with muscle on the neck, whereas a German Shepherd less. They have muscle, but not as much. So I think a bigger, and you're not going to see, generally speaking, you're not going to see the muscle twitch, but this is what I think maybe produces the differential. So, but the long and the short of it is, we think for our method, the art of training your dog, that methodology, we call the baseline the educational level. It's what works in the house. Once you have worked with the dog long enough for the dog to understand, you tap the button, we're turning around. That's the educational level. Now, we do think about two other levels. The next one, we call it the reinforcement level. And that's what I think you were talking about when you were talking about your Malinois. We never want to raise the level on the dog until the dog fully understands what you're asking for, completely understand, has been trained for this, and just goes, I'm really busy right now. Mm-hmm. And so in our method, that dog is going to be on a line, whether it's a 6-foot leash or a 15-foot leash, because we transition into longer lines. But the dog who says, squirrel, I know what you want right now, but I can't be bothered. Yes, we're going to goose it up a little bit. But what you should see is the dog going, oh, you needed me. Sorry, I got a little distracted. What you're not going to see is, ooh, that's not what the reinforcement level is. The reinforcement. So here is the educational level. Excuse me, need you. Mm-hmm. Here's what the reinforcement level is. When you get to a lesson deep into the book where the dog might need it, it's a lot more like that. Anybody who's ever had a kid pull on their pant leg, mommy, 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 it doesn't matter what you're doing. You have to stop and you have to pay attention to that because it's so notable. So we call that the reinforcement level. Correction. Do some dogs eventually need a corrective level? Yeah, but it's a real minority. We call it the interrupter level because what it means is a dog is, let's say, chasing something, and it's so fixated on the chase that it's not feeling here. The adrenaline is super high. The dog's educational level is down here when he's normal, but he's not a little distracted. He's full board, just mentally, and usually they're running or doing something that they're super emotional about. And then you have to get right over that. You don't have to get up into the stratosphere as to where the dog is going to go, yow, and then, comply with you. There's really generally not a place for that in training. Look, I did boarding school training for a dog who, a lab, really nice dog. And weirdly, he did everything on one level. I mean, the dog just would, and it didn't bother him, but it always caught his attention. And that was level 12. Which is actually, a little high for certain dogs, a little low for others, but for plenty of dogs, 12 is high. But he wasn't troubled by it. 12 out of 100, right? So it's 12% of power. It's low. But anyway, if this dog was calm, we were doing indoor training, 12 was what caught his attention. If he was outside and chasing a bird, I could turn him around on 12. I sent him home, explained everything. She called me a couple weeks later and she said, hey man, things are incredible. I'm so happy. Like, he's so much better. And I'm not even having really to use the e-collar too much anymore. She said, but he ate my meatloaf. One of his things was counter surfing. She said, and he ate my meatloaf right off the counter. And I go, what'd you do? She goes, well, 12 didn't stop him. He just kept eating. I said, well, what'd you do? And she goes, I turned it up. And he kept eating. I said, how high did you get? She goes, I stopped at 16 because it's always 12 and 16 is a lot more. And he just kept eating. So I said, well, lady, you must make a pretty good meatloaf. I'm going to need that recipe. But what I told her that she needed to do for this particular dog was she needed to find his meatloaf level. All right. She goes, well, how do I do that? And I used to,
I love it.
Yeah, because he was a Labrador. Labradors, they're an emotional eater. Honestly, if I come back as a dog, I'm 100% coming back as a Labrador because I'm an emotional eater. It's like my spirit animal. So what I knew is I wasn't going to quit eating meatloaf for 12 either. So I told her, look, it goes to 100. I'm sure it's going to be nowhere near 100, but I need you to find the point where he spits the meatloaf out. And then he's like, just like, okay, I shouldn't have done that. And she called me back about 10 days later laughing. She had made another meatloaf, and she made a meatloaf just for Monty. And and she said, he did get it. She said, but he spit it out at 37. She said, so I couldn't believe it. She said, I said, just twirl slowly until he just spits out the meatloaf and walks out of the kitchen. I said, I don't want him screaming out of the kitchen. I don't want him jumping. I don't want him crying. I don't want him afraid to go back in the kitchen. I just want him to spit out the meatloaf and walk away. And she told me it was 37. And so the reason is that meatloaf put his adrenaline into the stratosphere, and we just needed to get over it. Man, I had another lab. This lady, she called me up and she was mad. She did not like this dog. And I usually don't like working for people who are angry at the dog, because then I worry, they're going to be too hard on the dog when I send it home. But I was talking to her. Her name was Kathy. And the dog is the dog Champ. And she goes, this dog is just horrible. I'm like, well, why do you keep it? And I was like, going to challenge her, to find the love for her dog. She goes, oh, it's not my dog. I'm like, what? She goes, well, it's my boyfriend's, and I think he's the one, but this dog is so horrible. I'm like, well, what's so horrible about this poor dog? She goes, okay, here's one example. She said, my boyfriend refuses or doesn't remember to just close the bathroom doors. She goes, and this dog eats toilet paper. She goes, he makes confetti out of it. She goes, so I have to remember toilet paper in my purse whenever I go over there. She goes, it's just embarrassing. And so, I trained Champ up for everything. And when it finally got to toilet paper and I put a roll of that out there, that was like his graduation ceremony, right? Oh my God. I don't even remember what his number was, but he got so happy when he saw that toilet paper. And I was able to get him off of the toilet paper, but it took more than I would have thought, because we teach leave it. We start leave it off of easy things, and then we work our way up to whatever the hard thing is. And when he spit the toilet paper out and then wouldn't go near it again, A, Kathy was really happy. B, the dog, he didn't cry, he didn't yelp, he just spit out the toilet paper and walked away from it. And when I looked at the number, I thought, that is freaking higher than I would have expected. I think it was probably like 40, 45 is high, I thought. But he was unfazed. He just didn't want to get near that toilet paper again. So I told her, you might have to do this in your house, but I don't think 45, I don't think it'll take whatever it was. I said, I think it's half of that, because he's going to be like, can I don't, okay, not a good idea. I thought so. So I said, don't, you won't have to crank it so high next time. So she called me up a couple of days later and she goes, this is my freaking dog. I'm not even giving him back. She goes, I walk him around the block. I'm so proud. He's so good. So I think she stole the dog. I don't know if she ever married the guy, but I do know she got the dog.
She might have been better off with just the dog anyway. Who knows?
Yeah.
But yeah, I think talking about the whole adrenaline thing and then the point of perception and all that, I think is really important. I think especially for like dog owners, just because it's like, yeah, just like your dog could be fine. Your dog could be super chill at the house or like in the front of your yard, but then like when there's actually like a tennis ball, soccer ball, or just like anything like that, once that adrenaline goes up, is like, as I had to learn from experience when like my dog tried to go after a cat, and I really had to go like really up high, and I was like, wow, okay, that your adrenaline was really out the roof.
Yeah. I trained a German Shepherd who was thrown out of the kids' soccer league. Family had a kid that was in soccer league, and the dog. They used to just be able to bring the dog to the games and practice and stuff. Giant German Shepherd, really, really big. They imported him from Turkey. He was huge, real nice dog too. But he was thrown out of the league because he would run onto the. Most dogs are not big enough to just pick up a soccer ball with their mouth, but he was, and he would just run onto the field, steal the ball in the middle of the game. And by the way, we had to go, my training partner and I, we had to, once we trained him, we knew we were going to have to go find soccer games. So we started attending soccer games, and oh man, did he light up on that ball. And we had to show him, like, remember that leave it command? Yeah, you got to do that right now. And that did work for him. But the key point is, I just want to return to this one concept. An e-collar is a tool. And what makes it good or not good are two things. And the first thing is the features of that e-collar. So in our book, in chapter 5, we tell you which ones we think are decent. But to make it easy on you, a decent e-collar is going to cost somewhere in the neighborhood of $200. The $30, $40, $50 ones, I have yet to find one that isn't horrible.
Yep.
I wish there was a good one for $50. There just isn't. If that changes, I will let you guys know. But don't cheap out, number one. Number two, once you have a decent e-collar, it's super important you learn how to use it. I mean, we don't just buy a car, hand the keys over to a kid, and just go, here, good luck. We teach the rules of the road. We work together. And so with the dog, you cannot slap an e-collar on the dog and just expect him to know what he's meant to do when you push a button. So what you need is a method. And there are multiple methods, but we like ours. Our method, which is very sequentially built on 16 lessons that you teach over 6 weeks. Dog trainers can cut that in half, by the way, because we know how to shortcut it. But for the average dog owner, they need to guide the dog through this process. But what is baked into every lesson is the exact sort of body language that the owner needs to give to the dog for the dog to understand what we're doing here. So really, if I was going to define our method, I would say it's very clear body language combined from a brief tap from a collar. And what we're looking to do is to tap into the dog's pack drive. And the pack drive of the dog is that desire that the dog has to follow and collaborate with the leader, which we want to be you. And that's not so you can micromanage a dog. It's so that you can liberate the dog.
Yeah, and I think that's really important too. Like, because sometimes I'll play a game that I to promote pack drive, and later is I lose your dog. Like, I'll put them on, and really just work on it. But I think what's really important to bring out is making sure like you have a good foundation. Like, start at the home. Like, really just like don't put on an e-collar, just go in a big soccer field. It's just like, especially where it's like, if anything, like if you make a house without foundation, the house is just gonna crumble like soon as like a little wind blows it down. Or like if your dog doesn't have the clarity or doesn't understand what the e-collar means, then you're gonna have a confused dog, you're gonna have a frustrated owner, and it's just not gonna be a good combination. And even like I've tried the Amazon collars on my arms.
Yeah.
And like level 1 felt like level 10 or 15 on a mini educator, and I'm just like, yikes.
Yeah.
And I was like, and I took that collar from my client. I'm like, I'm gonna just take this now, and I'm gonna trade you with this mini educator, and just gonna have this Amazon collar for education purposes. Just not what to buy, but it was definitely
super common problem.
Yeah. But yeah, just being able to like, because especially with me is like when I do teach e-collar with my clients and their dogs, I always say just start from the home, just start. And when your dog's understanding that, maybe the backyard, and then it's kind of like, and then long line, just to make sure it's safety. Because in the case your dog actually doesn't feel it, but your dog takes off, it's like you're either going to be like have terrible grass stains and bruises and cuts just trying to dive bomb to catch your dog, or you could be safe, and have a long line that you can step on the long line, or just have that second line of safety, because especially people sue each other so fast for the littlest of things from
And
anything.
as the dog is learning the system, so are the people.
Mm-hmm.
And I get some people who worry a little bit, like, oh, it's a lot of technology, I'm going to have to manage it, but it's really very simple. Your iPhone, your cell phone, your Android, whatever you have, that's a lot more complex than the controller on almost any e-collar, and people know how to use those. So, but one of the reasons that we like to start slow with the dog is, before we put the dog in harm's way, we want the dog to have the muscle memory of what to do, what a recall means, even if there's distractions. But we want the people also to have built the muscle memory in a safe zone, in terms of, what do I do when my dog takes off? Because it's very canine. But we teach, the part of the book that I think I'm maybe the proudest of, is, besides just the lesson plan that gets the job done for normal people, is the last chapter in the book, which is the problems appendix. And we list out about 60 different dog behavior problems that people struggle with.
Mm-hmm.
And then we just give you a couple paragraphs about each one. And those solutions to all those problems, those solutions remind you how to use skills that you taught the dog earlier during the lesson plan, and how to apply them for this particular situation.
Mm-hmm.
And that problems chapter almost didn't come to be, because our book editor, who is a very, very fine editor, very skilled editor, but she was really against including that chapter. She wanted to cut it. And of course, Brother Christopher and I were adamant that, we wanted it. So finally, and a lot of the way a relationship works with an editor is, they really do have skill. And so you have to respect their requests and opinions. But if you feel strongly that they're wrong about something, you have to make the case as to why, and then really kind of talk it through. So finally, that's what I did about that chapter. And I asked her, I said, why do you not want it? I mean, I know you don't want it, but can we just talk about why? And she said, sure. She said, part of what we as editors do is we do market research. So we look at every other book that's, on the market now, and maybe for the last 10 years. And we just want to see, differences and commonalities. She said, you have a really unique take. So that's good. That's why, we're doing this. She said, but there's not a book on the market that has a chapter like that lists problems and solutions. And I said, I know. Do you know why there's not a book on the market that has ever done that before? And she said, no. I said, because they couldn't, because they didn't have answers to all those problems. Dog digs holes in the the only one who ever had answers to that stuff was Bill Keeler, and that is way out of favor these days. But,
Mm-hmm.
Dog licks stuff in the dishwasher. Well, some people don't care, but other people don't want that, because there's knives and chemicals in there. Dog digs holes. Dog herds the neighbor kids. Dogs jumps the fence. Dog doesn't come when called. Dog is aggressive to invited guests. Dog is aggressive along an invisible fence line. Dog jumps on people. There's 60 of them, and we have an answer to every single one. And as a professional dog trainer, Kevin, the average client calls you up and goes, how do I get my dog to stop? And then they give you this list.
Yep.
And if anybody ever asks me how to stop it, it's in this book.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're very proud of that too.
Yeah, no, Emmy is it's a super good resource, and especially especially when it's like your book's just going to be sold at all different locations of the state, and then it's just like a nice guide. It's like really good guidance at that point, where it's like, you've done this with dogs with different issues, and it's like, okay, now you're just being able to help pass that knowledge to like basic dog owners, like after they went through like the whole chapters, like the whole 16 week, and that's the thing, is like I feel like people, like pet owners, well, most pet owners try to do best with their dog, but they just need like a helping hand, guiding direction, where it's like your book is like, it really helps out and gives them like that good direction.
Yeah, I think it's very useful for dog owners, of course. But, let's bear in mind, I'm a professional dog trainer. So are you. So are a lot of the people in our audience. So let me just tell you the impact that this book has had on my life as a pro trainer. It didn't take away my business. It just made it easier. So if you're a pro trainer and you're thinking, I don't know, you're telling people how to do it themselves, they won't need me. Oh no, you know, the average person, not all people, but a lot of people, it's not, they've got two problems. The average dog owner has got two problems. The first is they don't know what to do. And the book will help with that. But it won't help with the second problem, which is where you come in. And the second problem is, and they don't have the time or the inclination to do it by themselves, or even the discipline, the self-discipline to work on the problem. And that's why they come to professional dog trainers. So I have found a couple things help me when I make sure that my client, when I'm doing my go home lesson, I do it according to the book. I use certain lessons in the book, and I make sure that they have the book. And here's what happened. My callbacks, a callback is you send the dog home, they call you back, he ate my meatloaf. My callbacks they were never terrible, but boy, did they decrease a ton when I trained the dog according to the book, and then made sure that they had the book as sort of like the owner's manual. You have an owner's manual to your car, so you know where the fuses are. And the art of training your dog, this is the owner's manual to their dog's training. So I want them to have it, because if they call me back with a problem, rather than having to reinvent the wheel and explain it from scratch, I can usually say, let's turn to this page together. There it is right there. And that also helps train them to look for their solutions, in the book. So it has been super helpful, because I'm not wasting a lot of time reminding people what I said, because it's writing. So that's super helpful. And also, I do more than just boarding training. Sometimes I do lesson plans for local clients. And then I just select, there's 16 lessons in the book. And sometimes I just want to do a 5-lesson package for those people. And we tackle 4 lessons in the first 4 visits, lesson 1 through 4, send them home for a week or 2 to do their homework, have them back, check that the dog knows his stuff. Then we do lesson 5, 6, 7, etc. And then once we've gotten through all of the lessons, we have the dog we're working on my property off leash, or at least dragging a long line. But that is when we can then discuss in that 5th lesson, really get into the problem behaviors. If they still have any, some of them won't even have problem behaviors by the time they get through the training program, because most dog behavior problems are the result of the dog being bored and frustrated and you being unclear with the dog. So a lot of times problems go away before you even get to that chapter.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, I mean, definitely it's just like, even sometimes I remember when I would ask a question on Facebook, or and then you chime in, you have my book, go to page 68. And I'm like, wait, what does this have to do? And I'm like, oh, it's right here. And it's so funny. I'm like, oh yeah, Mark had it right here for me.
Well, it's funny. The monks and I, we wrote 3 books together. Let Dogs Be Dogs was the first one. And we had so much fun putting that together that we just kept going. But Let Dogs Be Dogs is about just how to live with your dog. And Kevin, you live with your dogs in a different way than your clients live with theirs. And therefore, even though you do need to formally train your dogs, it's so much easier than training theirs, because they've kind of been very unclear with the dog since they got him, and therefore the dog has tuned out how to learn. So Let Dogs Be Dogs is just the secrets of how to live with a dog to create better behavior without training. And then we did the training book, which is what we've been talking about here. And then our latest book is called The Joy of Playing with Your Dog, and it's games, tricks, and socialization for puppies and dogs. So we wrote about how to live with your dog, how to train your dog, and how to play with your dog, all for better behavior. It's been a real joy working with those monks.
Yeah, no, I would. Yeah, somewhere along the way, like my bucket list is to go up there and like learn from you, learn from the monks. That's definitely on my list to do. So, but is that between like I got like five, like you, like Mark, you're on my list, and then you like out of
Or
five, there's five more. So
you can't
I'm
do
getting
everything. You can't do everything all at once. I will be at the Monks of New Skeet next week to do our June training seminar. There's information on that at theartoftrainingyourdog.com. But what Kevin you're referring to is our big seminar that we do there once or twice a year. But at newskeet.org, Skeet, Skete, at newskeet.org, you'll find they have a retreat program, I'm pretty sure. So people go up there on like spiritual retreat. They don't, they're not proselytizing or anything. It's just a quiet, meditative place to find your spiritual and emotional center. And so you can go up there very economically and visit. In fact, visitation is free. You can always stay nearby and just visit the monastery. Let me know if you want that. I'll hook you up with a dinner.
Ooh, no. Oh, I am definitely gonna hit you up for that. Okay, so yeah, I think that was a good general, just speaking about the e-collar, making sure like levels and importance of foundation, and like, I mean, like for you, Mark, like aside from the giving the dogs, like, do you feel like with training the e-collar, like, is it like for you, like when you explain the benefits of having your dog e-collar train, is like, it's like, what are the main ones that you always promote? Is it like the freedom part, or is it like just being able to help your dogs with address certain issues like after going through the lessons?
I think that's such a good question, and I want to give you my take on it. But before I do, there's a comment from Annika that's in the. So let me just read this. Thank you for your book and for the Facebook group, which is the same name as the book. Living in Europe, where e-collars are illegal. They're not illegal everywhere in Europe, just certain countries. Living in Europe, where e-collars are illegal, there is no dog trainer who's able to help me. I was apprehensive doing it myself due to the stigma and the fright I would hurt my dog. But your book helped me overcome this. My stubborn Chow is starting to get it, and so am I. I'm very grateful for being able to give him more freedom, even if we have to do it in secret. So, well, thank you so much, Annika, for the kind words. So really, this is what it's all about. When I first started writing books, I thought it was pretty cool, because I'm signing autographs, like literally signing books, it's like kind of a cool thing. And the Monk and I were at a book expo in New York City with thousands of people and signing autographs on our first book, and it was really cool. And I said to him, "What's the best part about writing books? What do you think?" Because I'm thinking, this is like, I'm not going to lie, this was an ego boost. This was like this big ego boost. And but boy, Brother Christopher, he popped that balloon for me really quick. And because he didn't scold me, I didn't even tell him what I was thinking. But when I said to him, what's the best part of writing books? He goes, "Oh, that's easy." He goes, "We're helping thousands of people we've never even gotten to meet yet." And that was so humbling to me when he said that. And I realized, oh, he's a monk for a reason, because he's got a very humble, modest, giving, generous heart. And Annika, just really the best part about this for me is helping people to reach a more profound relationship with their dog. So I can kind of leave it on this note.
Mm-hmm.
When we were at that seminar, we were in a giant room filled with, it was the Jacob Javits Center. I think there were probably 8 or 9, 10,000 people in there. It was very, very huge. And Brother Christopher and I each had a New Skeet Shepherd on leash. We had permission to bring in dogs, so we had New Skeet Shepherds. And Brother Christopher was in a black robe. I was just in street clothes, but he was in his monk's robe. And some people were recognizing him / us. And this one lady came up and she said, "Are you the monks?" And I said, I'm not. I'm friend of the monks. That's the monk. And she started hugging him and crying. And we gave her a moment to compose herself. And she said, no, I'm sorry. She goes, here's what it was she said, I had a boxer about 20 years ago. And I didn't think I could keep him. He was such a badass. She goes, he was just awful. She goes, I didn't think I could keep him. And she said, I was at my wit's end, but I read your book. This was this was How to Be Your Dog's Best Friend. She said, I read your book. I did what it said. And he was the best dog ever. And he was my bosom buddy. He was like my life. She said, and he lived to be 15 years old. She goes, but I thought I was going to have to get rid of him. So the beauty of it really is, yes, it's a beautiful thing to create freedom for the dog. Absolutely. But I think at the end of the day, what it really comes down to is we're helping people build relationships, and those relationships make people and dogs happier.
Mm-hmm.
It improves our lives. It improves their life. And that first dog, that first dog that I told you about,
Mm-hmm.
he's gone a very, very long time. But he comes to me in my dreams still, all these years later. Because he was the first, and he put me on this path, and I've had such a blessed life, really, because I had that dog who had to be trained. And so I think really at the end of the day, it's quality of life. We're just building happier lives. And I think all dog trainers, especially effective ones, should be very proud, because what we do it's a beautiful thing, and it helps so many people.
Yeah, no, 100%. That's how I feel. Like, because I've helped different clients using the e-collar, whether it's like, going off leash, being freedom, or just like having a border collie go around the ranch and then not try to go after the horses, like just being able to like create that connection. And just I love it. Like, I love when clients send me updates on how they're doing with their dogs and they're going on adventures. I'm like, I love it. Let's see, what's this comment? George, you're allowed to let them run in your minds. I would, whenever you want.
What he means is you can summon them, Big Tug was a wonderful dog. This was a really big golden retriever that George had back in the day, and I remember Tug was a great retrieving dog. He retrieved anything, and I remember one time George says, "I want to sit down, but the nearest chair is way over there. Tug, go on, get." Because George got that good old boy Maryland thing going on. He says, Tug, go on over there and bring me back a chair. Tug went on over there and just drug him back a chair. But he's right. They never really fully leave us. They just never really leave. Kevin, as you're a young man, and as you get older and older, and you have these different generations of dogs come in and out of your life, what you're going to find is they just never really fully leave.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. All right, so that was really good. Thank you so much, Mark, for that. So like right now, like I have all your websites listed on the banners right here. So like if people wanted to reach out to you, right, it's chicagodogtrainer.com, and then you also have artoftrainingyourdog.com, and then you also have Mark Goldberg dogtraining.com.
So many websites.
So many websites. But yeah, but I'll have it all here, and then people can just like go back and get copy paste, so it's all good. So, but I think
gentlemen,
my dogs are staring at me right now.
I'm sure
it's almost dinner time.
It must be dinner time. Kevin, I just want to thank you for spending all this time with me and giving me access to your listeners, and I sure appreciate your live stream and your time today.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you're kind of, for me to have you on, I was like a little nervous, but I'm like, I've talked to you before and I've like hanged out. I'm like, okay, I don't think he'll say no, but like no. you're kind of like one of a little bit of my idols / mentor, especially even since I've talked to you through Zoom like during COVID and all that. But no, I really appreciate your time.
That's a lot of pressure, Kevin. I just have to make sure I deserve it. That's all.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. You most definitely deserve it. Especially you're the last. You're kind of like the dessert of the live stream of my series. So, which is awesome. So, But I think Mark and I are going to sign off, just wrap up, but hope everyone has a good rest of your Sunday, and I'll talk to you guys soon. So thank you for attending all the series and watching till the end. So appreciate everyone. So I'll talk to you guys later. Peace.